Hi, welcome back to another TerranScapes video. This is another episode for question and answers, and there's quite a few in the queue, so let's just get right to them. So the first question comes to us from Philip. Comes to us because we're all, in this together. He says, I'm currently looking to make a Dark Ages set of buildings. The stumbling block for me at the moment is the thatched roofs. I would love to sculpt one and then make a mold of it. However, I have no idea what materials to use to sculpt it. I have seen people using air drying clay, but I'm worried that it just won't have enough detail, and the shrinkage would also make it difficult to estimate exactly what size I am going to achieve. Well, Philip, first I would recommend going to Rubbish In, Rubbish Out's channel. There was a video a ways back where he actually sculpted thatched roofs, and I can't remember the material that he used, but it was some kind of a plaster maybe, or sculpt-a-mold or something like that, but I'm probably wrong. In any case, he uses a stippling action on the material with a old brush to produce the sort of layered thatch roof look. So you might check that out. If I were to pick a material for myself to work with it, I might try Sculpey. If I make the frame on something that can withstand a little heat, and I keep the thickness of the Sculpey relatively thin, then it could be baked, and then you could make a mold from that. And in fact, you may, well, I'm trying to think about how to do the peak. I guess I'm thinking of it as a single piece, but that might be tricky to mold. But anyway, that's up to you to figure out how to get them to join with a nice seam. But in any case, Sculpey or Super Sculpey, at that thickness should bake well and holds detail great. I agree. I wouldn't be a fan of air drying clay, partly because it might crack. If you keep it thin, it should be all right. And it shouldn't shrink that much. It does shrink as it cures, but as it dries, but it won't lose a lot of dimensional length. And if you are curious, roll out a sheet equal to the size you're going to make for your roof, let it dry, see how much it shrinks, then you'll know if you need to make it a little bit bigger to compensate for that. So that's my suggestion. If I can find the cursor, we can look at the next question. So Gerard asks two questions. He lives in Jacksonville, Florida, and due to the hot climate, the availability of Owen Corning's foamular is very low at the major hardware stores. Now that is the pink foam or the blue foam that is commonly used for terrain making. Foamular is the brand that I use, and it's one of the most common here in the New England area. All I've been able to find is 3/4 inch thickness, and I'm looking for 1 inch to 1.5 inch. Do they stock the 1 inch thick foam boards of 2 by 2 feet? Oh, I'm sorry. They do stock the 1 inch thick boards in 2 feet by 2 feet, but if I'm looking for bigger pieces of foam, I seem to be out of luck. I have found a specialty store that stocks 1 and 1.5 inch thick pieces, but the price is a little up there. Would you, or any of the viewers, feel free to comment. Is this camera a little crooked? Seems like it might be. We're going to take a second here. There we go. That looks better. Would you or any of the viewers might know of another solution I could try to still achieve a thickness of 1 and 1.5 inch foam? Well, it's tough being in the southern climate. Getting foam is a little bit of a trick. I still think the camera's crooked. But I would say I have not been able to order it and have it shipped at any kind of reasonable cost. It's, you're paying for bulk volume, so shipping it is a bit of a bear, and you might not need that much. So I would say pay the extra and buy the 2 by 2 feet sections, or buy the 3/4 inch sections and just glue them together. You'll get a 1.5 inch piece out of that. And then you might be able to pick up the 1 inch from the specialty store. I mean, really, there's no other solution I can think of to that. If any of the viewers have any other suggestions, feel free to leave a comment down below for Gerard. He has a second question. Let's see here. What is your order for flocking a board? What I mean is the following. For me personally, this has been successful. Paint the undercoat dark brown on the pink foam. Coat the top of the whole board with sterilized or dried dirt. Shake off the excess dirt, let it dry. Coat the areas with watered down PVA glue. For the flocked areas, sprinkle on and feather flock to let that dry. Then spray with more watered down glue to seal it and let it dry again. That is fine. I think that works. The only thing I do slightly differently from that is I don't paint the foam first. I actually put the sand down and then I prime over that. But I use a paint gun, like one you might use to do your deck or something like that, so it can push latex paint. And I find putting the paint over the sand helps to bind it a little bit better, right? So you have the glue underneath the sand, then you have the paint going over the top of that, and that really seals it down pretty tight. But if you're looking for natural dirt color, and a lot of railroaders do this actually, they bake a big tray of dirt from their yard usually, and then once that's dry they sift that out and then they apply that directly. You can't get a more natural color than that. Basically, otherwise it's the same. Once I paint the sand, then I let that dry. Then I paint that. So that's where I'll go in and dry brush the sand, and then it's glue and flock. Once that's dry, seal with watered down glue, and you're off. So it really depends on the color of the sand you're looking for. If you're willing to paint it yourself, I would prime it over the sand. That would be my preference. That's the way I do it. But I'm looking for a pretty heavy durability for customer use, but you adapt it to your own uses as needed. Let's see here. Ivan, I believe, asks a question. I'm currently experimenting with making trees from wire and bamboo for the foliage. I'm using teddy bear stuffing soaked in green paint, which gives a good overall shape, but I was wondering if you could recommend a flock that would give a good leaf texture to it. I have tried generic flock and it's a little clumpy. It's a little hot down here still. It's better though. Oh God, I should have looked at this before. Hold on. There we go. You might try, and I have not used this because I don't really like the color, but Knock sells basically scatter leaves, and I believe they have a variety of colors. Oh, of course. Let me lean in the light here so you can actually see this label. There we go. So basically it is a pouch of small, leaf-like texture. And I've seen this look very good applied to other surfaces. Sometimes people use, what's the word I'm looking for? It's sort of like a gauzy filament that Woodland Scenics makes, or you could apply this over, flocked trees to give them a more realistic leaf texture. In any case, try a Knock and see if you like any of the colors that they have that they're offering. I would recommend just probably doing, spray glue over the top of the trees, sprinkle on the flock, maybe repeat applications depending on the density you're looking for. And I'd be curious to see, actually, a video of what your trees come out like, because it's pretty interesting, using bamboo. I'm not sure in which way you're incorporating that, but I'd be interested in seeing that. I think other people might be as well. Question 2. I recently watched a video by Terrain Minion about basing materials, and he suggested baking soda and cat litter. I was wondering if you had any unusual materials you use. We've talked about cat litter before, I believe. Baking soda tends to yellow, so be careful with that. A lot of people cut white paint in that to compensate for that. Unusual materials I use. I don't use any unusual materials, really. I'm afraid of deviating from sort of standard products, mostly because I need to match over time, but they're also tried and true, so I try not to be as experimental with basic materials as much as possible. Can you suggest a simple, cheap water effect for bases, small pieces of terrain? Plenty. A lot of people use Vallejo water effects. You can use Woodland Scenics realistic water, but you'll need a little lip to hold that, as it will, will pour off the sides. You could use Mod Podge, which is another way to create, gentle ripples. You could use golden gloss medium. That's probably a little more expensive, but it gives very good effect. So it's going to really depend on the kinds of texture you're looking in your water. You know, if you want still water, I'd recommend creating a depression in the base, and then you could fill that with Woodland Scenic's realistic water. Not the cheapest, but the easiest to use. And so, you know, and plus you can buy it kind of small volumes, so it's cheap overall compared to buying, say, like a big kit of Envirotex and trying to get that little bit of resin in between the legs of a miniature and on the base. I don't recommend that. So anyway, just be aware that the Woodland Scenic's realistic water shrinks when it dries, as opposed to some of the other products I mentioned, where they're sort of a stiffer body gel and they'll hold their shape once they cure. Let's see here. Last comment / question. Noticed on your site you supply Hirst Arts castings. Just wondering if you could give me an idea of how much they would be and if you have a minimum order quantity. Oh, that's true. Well, no, the price is on there. It's $240 a cast right now. Minimum I have request. I don't require it. I request would be 10 casts, just because I have to set up the boards and, you know, get out the plaster and all of that. But that's what I'm charging at the moment. So that's subject to change as time goes on. But currently, that's where I'm at. That's a fairly competitive rate. And now, if you need multiple casts out of a single mold, I can make a bigger mold out of the Vinamold. It doesn't really save on the cost to the customer a little bit, but it does make it feasible for me so I can handle bigger orders. So that's something to consider if you need like 50 casts out of a single mold. So let's see, next question from Ben. How are we doing on time? Not too bad. Have you ever used any of the Vallejo water, white stone, sandstone effects? If so, can you recommend a non-messy way to apply the substance? I've tried a popsicle stick and an old brush, but that thick paste just goes everywhere. Well, for the Vallejo water, I use a popsicle stick, but I'm dealing with slightly larger sizes, so I recommend taking, and in fact, just for those of you who don't know, Vallejo also makes sort of like a pumice material that has color mixed into it, and so you apply that onto your bases of your miniatures, and then it gives you both texture and a foundation color to work from. It is a fairly thick material, and what I would do is take a popsicle stick and trim it down to, say, maybe 1/8 of an inch, so you can get in there with small amounts and push that around. I don't think you're going to find a better tool than that. And in fact, you know, you could even shape the, you know, so here's my little thin popsicle stick. You could cleave it at an angle at the tip, so you have a, you know, you could basically model some of the typical clay carving tools. Of course, if you want to buy some tools, you could get, oh God, let's see here. Let me just pick I should talk into the camera. Let me pick a couple. You know, so clay shapers come in a variety of, you know, styles. They have different kinds of tips on them. So that's the problem with the light so far forward. Let's see if I can, there we go. So you can kind of see, anyway, you know, if you had a set of clay shapers, if you do sculpting or anything like that, that might be the kind of thing to have on hand, and then you could use them to apply these materials to your bases, variety of shapes, you know, pick the one that works best for you. But me, I would try trimming down a popsicle stick first. Alright, so that was Ben. Let's see, we'll keep going for a couple more here. Michael writes, have you ever worked on something for 6mm other than the terrain pieces made for World War II vehicles? What materials would you suggest for 6mm fantasy or medieval buildings or fortifications? Well, I mean, for a start, you know, for most of the non-building things, you know, just pick small pieces of things. A lot of things work for scales, you know, if you pick appropriate sizes. You know, Woodland Scenic's, they make a bag of like 144 armatures that are about 1 inch high, you know, with some careful flocking on them and foliage application. Those can look great for 6mm. You know, when I do plaster casts of stone, I'll take off some of the little tiniest broken edges of pieces where the plaster, you know, kind of dribbled into a corner, and those become great 6mm rock outcroppings. Whenever you use, you know, clump foliage, you know, just picking out the tiniest bits and applying them with tweezers. That's an idea. For buildings, though, and fortifications, I think you're on your own. Saying that, you might take a look at Bacchus Miniatures. Bacchus Miniatures makes a whole line of 6mm historical miniatures. They may have some buildings that might work with that. I don't know if they go into the medieval side of things or the fantasy setting, but they do Napoleonics and some other historical settings, and that's B-A-C-C-U-S, Bacchus Miniatures. So you might try there, and if they don't have anything, I'd ask them. They're pretty heavy in the 6mm market, so they probably would know more than I would. Otherwise, you're carving it out of foam yourself. But hey, it's small, so you know, it's not a big project. You might try that and see where you get. I think a 6mm scale castle would be kind of a fun project to do. Let's see. Sean writes, when you want to build multiple copies of structures, such as to supply my store, do you design and build the structures, then break them down into large pieces for molding and casting? If not, how do you go from structure design to cast product? When designing a new structure, what is the priority given to be ability to mold and cast the pieces versus the aesthetics of the structure? Well, I have been working at this point to have my buildings be entirely one piece so that I don't have to worry about joins. Sometimes when you're using expanding foams, for instance, you know, George, the expanding foam can you know, press out a wall or something like that. Now that shouldn't happen if you have a nice shell for your mold when you're casting, but you know, then it's lining up edges and things like that, and I've just been, if I can avoid it, I try to avoid it. So basically I build the model mostly for aesthetics, and I worry about the casting later. If I was going to have some crazy pendulous thing coming off of it, I don't know what that would be, but let's say I did have that. George is now rubbing on the tripod. George! He needs to go back outside. You know, if I had something weird overhanging it, then I probably would have to do it as two parts, as a severe undercut would be a problem. So aesthetics for me is the first thing. Then I go back over it and seal it and backfill any of the openings. That's why on the towers, you know, the windows are black, because I've gone in and backfilled that so they're not, you know, it's not a hollow shell that you can see through. So make the master, seal it, make the shell really, and I've gone into, actually, there's a video a ways back, there's the back finger again, to go in as an overview of how I use smooth-on products to make a void cavity fill mold, and that is how I do large buildings. So if you're interested in seeing that process explained in a, you know, mildly detailed, fairly cursory manner, then you could check that out and see that. But for the mausoleum, for instance, it does have some, you know, sharp angles and some I don't want to call them undercuts, but vertical cuts, if you will, horizontal cuts. This is horizontal, and so you know, that makes demolding it a little bit more of a challenge. But it was, you know, it's not terribly difficult. So for most things, mold making for buildings isn't really a challenge. That is, you know, something I'm terribly worried about at this point. In the future, though, I'd like to make some two-part buildings, but you know, time is the enemy for new projects like that. And we'll do one more, and we'll wrap it up. So Nathan writes, I have recently started making a new riverboard for wargaming. I have bought the necessary materials for the project: polystyrene, plywood, Envirotex, etc., etc. I was wondering what glue you would use and how much to apply to glue the polystyrene to the plywood. I will be carving out a river after the glue is dried, so it has to have a great bond. Any tips and advice, such as applying something heavy on top of the foam while drying, would be appreciated. Well, I currently recommend Styro Goo from the Hot Wire Foam Factory. Styro Goo, if you haven't see, oh, I don't have it right here. It's over because I'm using it. Styro Goo, though, is a clear, very heavy-bodied gel adhesive. And it's all one word, Styro Goo. If you go to the Hot Wire Foam Factory site and you look at their adhesives, you'll find it there. And they're worth a visit for a variety of tools and products. But the Styro Goo works great because it has a quick bond. It's going to dry faster in the interior of the piece than, say, white glue or wood glue will dry. And because it has a lot of body, you know, the plywood, even though it's smooth, it's, you know, if you're using a rough piece of plywood because you got, you know, a second class, what, lower grade quality, that's what I'm looking for, you know, where it has voids in it and things like that, the styro goo will fill those and create a good bond. So I recommend the styro goo for that kind of an application, even though you're going from, you know, foam to wood. It's a general all-purpose adhesive, and it should work great for that. As for applying something heavy on the top while it's setting up, I have a set of weights, iron weights, that I've used to, you know, bulk up and try not to, you know, get my gamer belly going. But in any case, you know, so those make great weights to hold things down, and I use them frequently for that, more frequently than I exercise with them. But you could also try bricks or books or whatever you have at hand. You know, you don't need a lot to hold it in place while it cures, so don't fret. Whatever you've got at hand that's heavy and easy to access, that's what I would use. If you have some cinder blocks lying around or something like that, that would be great as well. Alternatively, you know, whatever you've got, jars filled with sand, you know, whatever you have at hand, capitalize on that. You know, a couple pounds in a couple spots, unless it's horribly warped or something like that, and that's not enough, you know, then add more books. So that wraps up this episode of the question and answers. I'll have more questions already in the queue for the next episode. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Thank you for joining me on this crazy terrain train. And if you want to submit a question for the question and answers, please send an email to TerranScapes@gmail.com and include Q&A in the subject line, and I segregate those and turn them into a Microsoft Word document so I can scroll through them while I do these videos. Just makes it easier for me. Keep your eye on the channel. Definitely have a lot more videos that I need to shoot really quickly because I have to get some shelves free so I can rack up the next set of work more easily. So I have limited space here, so I got to get this stuff done. So there's definitely going to be more stuff coming out in the near future. So until then, thanks for joining me, and I will see you soon.